Hello, and welcome back to the New Leader series that we've been having for the last, this is our third week now.
Mhm.
So time is flying. We have really enjoyed going through all of our different topics with you guys. We kicked off week 1 by talking a little bit about the mindset of a leader and what it takes to kind of get your mindset in the right place to be a leader that, reaches its full potential. And then last week, we talked a little bit about change management, right? Like, how do we navigate change and uncertain times as leaders and take our teams, confidently through those transitions? And that has led us up to this point. So for week 3, we are going to be diving into all things delegation and time management. So we're going to take a lot of the mindset skills that we've learned and the soft skills that we've learned. And now we're going to talk about how do we actually put that into play and into practice. But I'm really excited about today's session. Brittany, how are you feeling?
I am feeling so good. These last, 3 weeks, technically have gone by really, really fast, but I've been loving hearing from everybody. So if this is your first week joining us, or if this is your third week joining us, let us know in the comments what you're looking forward to taking away today as we dive into this conversation on delegation and time management. And let us know where you're tuning in from. We want to connect with you. And there are so many other brilliant leaders that join us, and you can meet and make connections right in the comments. So whether you're watching this live or whether you're watching this again, make sure that you tune in to the comments and share your thoughts, questions, and feedback there.
Yes, awesome. Well, today we have a really good agenda for you guys. We're going to start by talking a little bit about ourselves. So we're going to reintroduce ourselves to you, and then we'll have you guys introduce yourselves in the chat as well. Then we're going to talk about the importance of delegation. What does delegation even mean, right? Why do we need to have that skill set in the workplace? Then we'll talk through some actual techniques for delegating, so putting them into practice. And then we're going to talk about time management really throughout the entire session. But then towards the end, we will dedicate some time to talk through time management at work.
Awesome. So Brittany Cole here. And as I've gotten to share each week, I have the pleasure of founding and leading an organization called Career Thrivers. We are a workforce and leadership development firm. So these topics that we're going over with you are topics that we share with organizations to help them to retain talent. So we work in 3 main areas. One, DEI strategy, or helping organizations think intentionally about how they are fostering a culture of inclusion, embedding it in the work that they do every day. Learning and development is our big bucket. So that's anything from a one-time keynote to licensing curriculum and content for leadership and career development. And then our third bucket is coaching. So we provide coaching really to the middle of the organization that typically does not get access to coaching, with a goal of helping organizations cultivate a culture of coaching, helping leaders understand what it means to coach, but also helping them understand what it means to be coached. So my entrepreneurial journey in starting Career Thrivers actually started in 2019. So we're coming up on 5 years, but it rests on about 13 years of corporate experience. 12 of those I spent at Pfizer. So I was a sales and marketing leader there. I did DEI work off the side of my desk. Many commercial leaders know what that's like when you're taking on additional projects and really helping to cultivate a great culture inside of your company beyond the title. And so was doing that work, really, really loved it. And a lot of the work that we get to do today, a lot of the frameworks that we use inside of Career Thrivers are built from that perspective, from the perspective of a business leader. And I think early on in my journey in founding Career Thrivers, I used to shy away a little bit from the fact that I am not an HR professional. I've never been an HR professional. We have great HR professionals that we get to work with, but we really come from this mindset of, if you work in the business, if you are having to implement what your HR team or your DEI team and your executive office is setting forward as an enterprise priority, what does that look like as a business leader every single day? So get to do that kind of work. I've authored a book, a best-selling book. There's a course right here on LinkedIn. So if you are in the midst of a career transition or just having challenges, the book is called Thrive Through It. The LinkedIn Learning course is called Thriving Through Career Challenges. So certainly encourage you to check that out. Tatiana, tell us a little bit about you.
Awesome. So I am Tatiana. I'm the CEO of T. O'Hara Consulting, where we focus primarily on helping first time people leaders really find their groove in their roles, right? So anything from learning how to identify their unique leadership style all the way to creating structure within their day to day, cultivating company culture, the whole nine. And I initially went to Kennesaw State University and studied hospitality management. And in the fall, I'll be going to UGA to get my master's in learning leadership and organizational development. And after graduating, I knew that I wanted to pursue something in the realm of people operations, just didn't know what that would look like. So I landed in grocery retail. So I was a district manager for Aldi grocery store for about 4 years. Learned a whole lot about people operations and leadership and learning how to work with people from all different walks of life to come together and really accomplish one common goal. And after my career there, had a very successful career, turned our district around from being one of the lowest performing to one of the top performing districts in the division. I went on to start my consulting company. So, spent the last few years servicing primarily small business owners and teaching them how to build their teams initially, how to create that company culture initially, and really building that foundation. And have started to pivot back into working with corporations as well, with those middle managers. And so, my overall goal for my company and just like my personal mission is to really bridge the gap between the structure of working in corporate and the structure that comes along with um, established companies, and then bridging that with the flexibility of entrepreneurship, right? So more of that autonomy. And I find that when you have that happy middle, our teams are thriving, right? They're more productive, they're more efficient, they're happier, the retention rates are higher. And so that's kind of what I've dedicated my work to. But I'm excited to be here with you guys today. All right. So if you are here live or if you're watching the replay, we'd love to hear from you. So tell us your name, what you do, and what you're hoping to gain from today's session. I know that today is going to be very practical. So I'm excited to see how you guys will kind of incorporate what we talk about into a lot of your day to day. But yeah, feel free to continue to introduce yourself and ask any questions, of course, in the chat as along the way as we go. All right, so let's get into it. So, when we're talking about leadership, right, we talk about your ability to have that emotional intelligence. We talk about you being confident in the way that you lead. We talk about managing change. But there is one skill that every leader needs, and that is the ability to delegate, right? So, we can think about this in a couple different ways in terms of like sports teams, in terms of like, a group in the military. But when you are in that leadership role, you are the leader of the team, right? And it's our job within our purview to support our team and to lead them to victory. And so, in order to do that, we have to have a really good understanding of the objectives and the goals and what actually needs to be done. But then also, we need to be able to equip our team with the tools and resources to do their jobs well. And a good part of that is your ability to delegate, right? Every team member needs a role because you will not be able to accomplish the thing, whatever that thing is, whatever that goal or that project is, you won't be able to accomplish that on your own, right? And so this is where your ability to delegate really starts to matter. And something to think about here is, if we're playing, let's say football, and you're the leader of the team, are you going to get the team together and create a really good play and make sure everyone understands what their role is and knows where to be, when to be there, how to be there, right? Or are you just going to take the ball and try to score yourself, right? When we try to do things on our own without equipping without equipping our team with the skills to be able to support us, what ends up happening is we get fatigued, right? We start to not feel so great about the work that we're doing. And then also our team really starts to lose that direction. So it's really important that you have the skill of delegation. Now, why does delegation even matter? I think, for a lot of new leaders, and let me know in the comments if you resonate with this, but a lot of new leaders feel sometimes as if delegating is pushing work off onto people, or that it's making their jobs harder. And so we tend to want to keep a lot of the work on ourselves because we think it's better if I do it, it's faster if I do it, I know it'll get done right if I do it, right? But there are a lot of reasons why, leaning into delegation is actually going to support the way that you lead day to day. So, first things first, when you delegate properly in the right way, you will be able to really focus on those high level strategic tasks. If you guys were here on week one, I talked about how when I was at Aldi, when I first came into my district, an issue that I noticed was that I would come in on the weekends because that was one of the things we had to do. I think we had to do one weekend visit per month. And we had to see all of our stores on a weekend because that's the busiest time, right? That's when the most sales volume is happening. And I would come in on, let's say, a Saturday at noon. Everyone's grocery shopping. It's peak busy time. And I see my store manager on the register, right? And I'm like, what's going on? And when I talk to the manager, I find out, well, oh, I'm on the register because I ring faster. And if I put my cashier on the register, then we're going to get backed up. But what was happening is orders weren't being done. The sales floor didn't look good. Customers weren't getting the help they needed because the manager wasn't where they needed to be. And so when you lean into delegation and training your team to do the things that you delegated to them, you're going to be able to actually sit in that role as a leader where your goal is to oversee and to make sure things are happening the way that they should. It also enhances your team skills and fosters professional growth, right? So when you delegate things to your team, they have the opportunity to grow and to try new things and to push themselves and to stretch themselves. It's going to prevent burnout on your part, right? And also promote work-life balance. Because again, when you try to take on all of the work, it becomes very overwhelming very quickly. And then finally, encouraging trust and empowerment within the team. And what that looks like is when you give your team different things to do, different tasks to try, they become more confident in themselves when they do it the right way, right? They feel more empowered. That's when you start seeing your team taking more initiative. Everyone wants their team members to take initiative, right? But sometimes we don't give them the ability to do that, right? And so delegation is a powerful tool that works not only for you, but for the benefit of your team as well.
So let's talk a little bit about some of those benefits. And Tatiana hit on this, right, in terms of it really being a skill that every leader needs because it is going to help you to increase your productivity and the efficiency of the overall team. It's not only for you as a leader being able to shift things from your plate, but also helping to ensure I'll just call it effective capacity, maybe not maximum capacity, but that there is an effective balance of capacity across the team. It also provides a learning and development opportunity. I believe this is a big one for leaders, right? Because if we think of our role as leaders, which is to a big part of it is to create more leaders, right? To develop people, to help to bring out the best in them, then delegation is one of the ways that you do that. It's one of the ways that you not only solve for efficiency, but you also solve for development. And part of that development has to do with your team learning a higher sense of responsibility, an elevated sense of accountability. That yes, you're having to master your performance in terms of your quote unquote day to day job, but then here are some additional responsibilities. It also improves job satisfaction and team morale because it shows that the leader trusts their team, right? And so there's a huge trust component that is unspoken in delegation that is almost immediately beneficial because the moment that you, as a leader, invite someone to elevate their accountability and responsibility on the team, it signals that you trust them, right? And so whenever you call someone up to a higher level of responsibility, it also helps to shift their morale, right? And in that kind of culture of, hey, we're all a part of this, we all have a role to play, really trickles throughout the team. It also provides a deeper understanding of what's important to the organization. So oftentimes when you can probably recall this, right? If you think back to your transition from individual contributor to first time people leader. And I always like pause at that language because it's like, I don't have direct reports, but I'm not only contributing to myself. Like I'm still contributing to the team, right? But of course, that is the HR language for you don't have direct reports. So we'll use it. We'll use it. But when you're making that shift, it can be one of the biggest kind of learnings in that transition is seeing the organization from a different perspective, right? And I can remember in my career when that shift happened for me, seeing only from my, and I didn't think I had a narrow lens, but I did. I was only seeing things from the perspective of the execution list of tasks that I had, right? The one district that I was responsible for, the one territory within that district that I was responsible for. The moment that you are either promoted into a leadership development role or you're delegated into one in terms of tasks, right? You get an opportunity to see things from a different perspective. And that can be so powerful for developing more leaders, but it can also be really, really powerful for workforce engagement as well as productivity across the team. And then last but not least, as you're delegating, right, it's not only helping to ease your load. It's not only helping to develop other people and create this great culture of accountability and helping those leaders understand the broader organizational goals, but it also gives you an opportunity as a leader to actually see demonstrated skill sets beyond what your team is doing in their day to day, right? So it gives you a direct line of sight into the various strengths, the various talents, the various interests that your team has that you may not be aware of because they're not flexing that muscle in their day to day. And that can be really powerful for performance management. It can be really powerful for succession planning when you're able to see that, oh, someone is in this role, but based on some of what I've delegated to them and how they've been able to deliver, they could be well suited for a shift, right? For a different role within the team. So, what are some things that you can hand off? What are some things that you can delegate? Well, you can think about your own maybe routine and repetitive tasks. Maybe there are items that you're seeing that you have to do every single week or every single month that could provide an opportunity to delegate to your team member. If you think about your own skills, right, your own competency development, are there areas where you say, you know what? I've been able to see that so and so on my team is just better at this. They're able to finish it faster. This isn't my zone of genius, right? That can be a signal that, hey, this is something that I can delegate to a team member. Learning opportunities, right? That's always something for you to consider as, I would say, kind of a non negotiable in this space. Like, yes, I'm looking for tasks for my team that provide learning and development opportunities for them. And then sometimes perhaps aspects of projects that need more hands. So if you think about additional projects that you might be working on. The other things that I would add to this list, and let me know in the comments, what would you add to this list? Maybe what are some things that you've delegated? I would add things that I've delegated have been, maybe I'm working on a project and I am covering all of my bases, but I have maybe an idea about something that might be a bit more innovative. And I don't really have the time to go down that discovery path, but I could delegate that to someone, right? And that opens up an opportunity for them to, again, have that line of sight, also for us to maybe try a different approach or a different way to get to the same goal. So there are many, many things that you can delegate. The purpose here is for you not to only think about it as, oh, I'm just getting the stuff that I don't want off of my plate. No, really be strategic as a leader. Really think fully about the skill set of your team, your own skill set. What are the needs of the business? And if there are any additional innovative projects that could move faster or have more impact with either more hands or a different set of skills, those are areas where you can delegate as well. Sometimes the word delegation gets a negative connotation in the workplace, but it is truly a learning and development resource for you as a people leader to cultivate a thriving team. So I'm going to kick it back to Tatiana to talk a little bit about how delegation is not the same as micromanagement.
Awesome. So I love even just the title of this slide for a couple different reasons. And kind of piggybacking off of what Brittany was just saying, I think sometimes delegation does get that negative rap, right? And a lot of times when we lack confidence in our ability to delegate, confidence in our ability to lead our teams, that can result in us micromanaging, right? And we want to avoid that as much as possible. So we want to equip you with the tools to feel good about the way that you're leading your people and feel good about the way that you're delegating different tasks, right? So the first thing here is that the more that you understand your role, the work that you do, the impact that you need to create, the objectives that you want to achieve, the easier it becomes to delegate, right? And so sometimes when we resort to only, delegating those, like the low-hanging fruit, right? The mindless tasks, a lot of times that's because we don't know what else we could possibly be delegating. But we're like, okay, I have this team, I need help. So let me just have this person do this little thing and have this person do this little thing. But when you have a better understanding of the big picture objectives, right? That could be something as big as, the project that you're working on and understanding the goals associated with your project, but it could be as small as some of the day-to-day objectives, right? When you have a better understanding of them, you're going to delegate better, right? And an example, so I work with a lot of small business clients that, kind of experience this where, they made their first hire. Let's say it's an assistant, a virtual assistant of some sort. And so they're delegating things like, check my emails, respond to these inquiries, and, so on and so forth. And yet they still feel like, I'm still very overworked. I'm still doing a lot of the work. I'm still putting in a lot of hours. Why is it that I've hired this person, but the needle isn't actually moving? But then when we really sit down and look at, again, the goals and the objectives of the company, and we look at what it is that they're doing day to day, we find that there are far more impactful things that your team members could be helping you with, right? And so maybe it's around process creation, process management. Maybe it has, something to do with your sales, your marketing processes, right? And so there may be way more impactful things that the team could be focused on. But the first step is for you to have a better understanding of where you're going, right? And when you're confident in your instructions, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to delegate, but when you're confident in the instructions and the training and the resources that you've given your team, you're less likely to micromanage. I'm sorry. When we do micromanage, that's usually coming from a place of lack of trust, of lack of confidence, right? And so whether that's trust and confidence in ourselves or trust and confidence in the people that work with us, but that is where micromanaging most likely originates from, right? And we think it helps us to lead better, but it actually doesn't. Obviously, it can damage the culture of the team and it can damage the trust within the team. But I think the worst part of micromanaging is that the team members never really get the opportunity to meet and to reach their fullest potential, right? They're limited to what you allow them to do. And so when we understand what needs to get done and we can clearly communicate that and make sure that our team is trained and has the tools to do the job well, then we can kind of let the reins go a little bit, right? We still provide support, we still supervise, right? We still oversee, but we're not hovering. And then we really start to see, what is my team capable of? All right, so let's talk about some tips for effective delegation, right? So, what does it look like in practice? And if you have any additional tips, I definitely want you to share them here in the chat. So, first things first is assessing your team members' strengths and weaknesses, right? So, this is really important when it comes to deciding who you're going to delegate certain things to, right? Sometimes we want to delegate something to someone based on the work that they've been doing or based on things that we've seen from them in the past, but that may not actually align with where their strengths lie. And so again, we want to play into that, right? We want to have that emotional intelligence and really start to understand our team's objectives and goals and stuff and see how the things that we delegate can actually fit into that and fit into their growth plan within the company. Consider workload and capacity. So this is a big one. I know, a couple people can probably attest to this, but sometimes it feels like when you're particularly good at your job, it almost becomes a punishment because your workload tends to be higher than some of your peers, right? And so we want to think about the workload of the team members that we may want to delegate to and their capacity. Because when we start to push people well over their capacity, that's when we see, the culture kind of decline, of course, but then also start to see that work quality decline as well. Clearly define the task and its objectives the first time. So, something I hear from my clients often is that it takes so long to explain the task, I could have just done it in that amount of time. And that might be true for the first or the second time. But if this is a task that's being done over and over again, it's a repetitive thing, maybe it's something we do every day or every week or every month, it is going to be in your best interest to take the time to define the task and to explain it thoroughly the first time, right? And so, what that might look like, instead of saying, "Hey, Susie, I need you to do this, have it done by Friday," that might look like clearly outlining what the task is, maybe mapping out some of the potential ways to get there, potential ways to do the task. If this is something that's been done in the past, can you provide past examples, past resources? If you guys have SOPs or trainings on this specific task, sending links to those. But we want to make sure they have everything that they need to get it done, right? Because when they don't have what they need, guess what's going to happen? Questions, right? That's when they're, knocking on your door if you're working in an in-person office, or sending those Slack or those Teams messages. Hey, what about this? Hey, how would I find this? Or where would this be located? So if we can do our best to kind of communicate thoroughly up front, it tends to save us a lot of time on the back end. And then on the back end of that would be setting clear deadlines and expectations, right? And so a tool that I like to use is when there is a task that needs to be done. Let's say I have a hard deadline. I know what the deadline needs to be. Maybe having some conversation with that team member. Hey, when do you think you could get this done by, right? Or what's a reasonable amount of time for this to be completed? And if that time that they say is within the deadline that you have, then go for it, right? But maybe if it's not, then we say, oh, well, could we actually push for this date? But a lot of times when we kind of bring our team members into some of those conversations around deadlines and even expectations and ways to get there, there's going to be a lot more buy-in from them, right? We also want to communicate openly and provide feedback. So as we're navigating through this task being completed, making sure that communication is just open, and that if they need support, you're there for them. If they ask for feedback or, your revisions, that you make the time to do that. And then empowering your team members to make decisions. So this is a really big one. Um, you kind of use your discretion as a leader. There may be some times where you have to make the decision, right? It may be a big decision that you can't give that responsibility over to someone else. But if it's something smaller or something that, again, fits within their role, their line of responsibility, then empowering them to make decisions, right? And so maybe they feel like they don't know what decision they should make. So sometimes, the best path is to say, hey, come up with a couple, paths forward or a couple solutions, and then some reasons for each, and we'll talk through it. And then you can coach them and guide them to landing on their own decision. And all of these things, all of these bullet points here, they take time. I want to, be honest about that. This is not anything that is fast, right? But the premise here is that when you take the time to do it and to do it right and thoroughly and with care, it's going to save you a lot of time on the back end. Do you know how much time companies would save if every team member felt empowered to make decisions? If every team member trusted themselves to make the decisions within their responsibility, right? Do you know how much fewer questions we would get, or how many people wouldn't be, being bombarded with, hey, tell me what to do, or hey, what should I do here? So delegation is a really powerful tool that you can use as a leader to help your team members grow, right? And to really, develop into their fullest potential.
So, what are some ways to overcome challenges once you delegate? You say, okay, I've heard you all. I am starting to delegate more. What might be some things to look out for? Well, one, you want to look out for your own sense of releasing control and feeling like sometimes that may manifest as you feel like aren't as in the know in terms of all the details of what's going on, right? And so you want to be mindful of the fear around that, right? Is it that, I don't know all of the details and that's maybe preventing something from getting done, or I don't know all of the details and that's shifting performance in some tangible way, or right, do I not know the details and I'm feeling fear about losing control, which is something completely different. So that can be a challenge. You also want to be aware of, again, there's that T word, right? Trust. Delegation rests on this unspoken truth that I'm handing this off because I trust that you will complete it. And a lot of times, I believe leaders really trip up here because you're handing it off not from a place of trust, but from a place of skepticism. And believe it or not, that energy transfers, right? That belief can really become embedded into how that team member takes on that assignment, because that belief is going to come through in how you communicate about the delegation. So you really want to delegate from a place of, I trust that this team member is going to complete this assignment. I trust that this team member is going to successfully complete this assignment. And if you're delegating something that you used to work on, so we talked about some of those different instances of delegation and things that you can delegate, right? I believe sometimes it is more challenging to delegate what you used to work on or what you were working on versus delegating something that you haven't touched yet that might be a new opportunity, because we assess the effectiveness and the impact oftentimes through the mirror and lens of what we would have done, right? And so that can create a challenge within the team, within your team members, in terms of not recognizing that you are applying this sense of, you know, my way or no way, really is sometimes how it can come across if you aren't mindful, right? So we just want to share these challenges so that you are mindful of, if I'm delegating something that I used to own, there's a possibility that it may not get done exactly how I would do it. But as long as the task is completed, right, that's the goal. So you want to be mindful of that, and you want to demonstrate a high level of trust in your team as you're delegating and not skepticism. Managing time constraints can be a challenge when we're thinking about delegation. So you really want to think through certain projects, timelines, things of that nature, and then just ensuring effective communication. You're handing off this project or assignment, but what are the communication checkpoints? What do you want those to look like? Who's initiating that communication? Making sure that all of that is really clear so that, again, you don't feel like, oh, I don't know as much of what's going on over here because I handed it off. And then again, that lack of trust is in your brain. So you're thinking that the work isn't getting done when it could be done and sent off right to the next team. So you want to make sure that you're managing how often you're communicating as you're delegating. And then last but not least, right, handling team resistance to the delegated tasks. So in those instances where you are making delegations, and I want to bring up this comment from, I believe it's a Wilda or a Wilda. Let me know in the comments because I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. But a Wilda has joined us all 3 weeks. But I love this additional comment that she shared. I use my team's development questionnaires, or maybe you may call it IDP at your company, to help me decide how best to involve them so they learn while taking on the task. And this is such a great leadership tip, right? Use that IDP, use that development questionnaire, and let that be your guide as you're delegating. And then as you're doing that, right, there also may be instances, yes, and where you're handing something off that maybe a team member doesn't want, right? They're resistant to taking on the task, or maybe it's something that's a part of their individual development plan, but they don't feel they're ready for it yet. I can recall instances of that for sure when I was at Pfizer and now at Career Thrivers, where you hand something off and the team members are like, I don't know if I'm, if I'm capable of completing that, or I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, right? And then your role really becomes, if you're thinking from a situational leadership perspective, to model, but also to coach, right, in those instances, so that you are encouraging that team member to take on this task to develop that skill. And then we're going to talk through some ways that this looks, right? Because we want this to be practical for you. We don't want this to just be a list of recommendations, but what can you actually take away and implement with your team? So, Tatiana, do you want to talk through some of these examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So, and we just kind of picked a few that we thought would be most applicable. But if you have any specific examples of things that you've delegated, or maybe something that might even be more helpful is something that you want to delegate, but you're not quite sure how to delegate that, drop that in the comments or in the chat for us, and we can kind of talk through that here. So, a couple of examples. One, delegating a project management task. So, I can just think of a time where I had to delegate a project management task. So, when I was at Aldi, we did 6 full store remodels where we would essentially, shut down the store for 6 weeks. We had a construction team come in. Some of our stores expanded in square footage. Some of our stores got new flooring. Ceilings were ripped out, completely new coolers and freezers and shelves and the whole nine, right? And so it was a really big undertaking. There was also a lot of additional hiring that we had to do. We had to get the marketing in order and invite, like, local government and whatnot to attend the grand reopening. And so there were a lot of tasks that seemed to have fallen on my plate, but I knew that I could really engage my team as well, right? And so the way that I kind of went about doing that was I looked at the entire project. Typically, if you're managing a project, you're going to have a project plan of some sort that you've built out in your respective, tool. Back then, we were just pen and paper. We had spreadsheets that we'd print out, and that was about it. We were pretty simple, but I would look at the entire project, right? And I would ask myself, where is my time best spent? As the leader of this entire project, where is my time best spent? Where can I create the most impact? And I would kind of go through and highlight those things, right? To identify that, like, I wanted to keep them on my plate. And then I would think about the people around me, right? The team members around me that would be, the best fit to work on these projects. So obviously that was my store manager. It was the people that have expressed interest in helping on this project. It was those that were interested in moving up into some sort of leadership position. Because when I'm thinking about those strengths and the weaknesses, I'm also thinking about their growth opportunities and how does this fit into how my team wants to grow and develop, right? And so from there, it was pretty easy for me to identify, like, oh, these 3 tasks would be really great for me to give to my store manager. They're already pretty close to this task. They deal with the ins and outs of whatever these tasks entail. Then I identified a few other tasks that I thought would be great to give to our assistant manager. And then I think we may have looped in like one other associate that was interested in helping, right? And so then, it was my job to then communicate that task. So the way I did it, because there were multiple people, we just kind of had a meeting all together to kind of discuss like the entire project plan, help them see the entire scope, help them to see how their task fits into the bigger picture. I think that's another thing we didn't necessarily talk too much about today, is like when the team members understand the impact that their work is going to create, it's a lot easier for them to buy into it. And it's easier for them to kind of take a step back too, right? And to not be so nose deep into the task itself, but to see the bigger picture. And so then from there, it was about setting deadlines, right? Making sure that they had the tools and the resources that they needed. This was kind of unfamiliar territory for us. It was our first time doing a remodel. So I had to kind of over communicate. And I know sometimes we think over communication can feel like micromanaging, but in this case, it was truly just managing. It was leading. It was showing up for my team and being there to support them through the different tasks versus me just kind of dumping it on them and then saying, okay, you got it, come back when you're done, right? So yeah, that would be an example of delegating a project management task. And then Brittany, if you have any examples for any of the other ones, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, so when I was leading a team here in Nashville, I had a team member that wanted more out of her career, but really wasn't sure that leading a team was meant for her. And so, when it comes to empowering a team member to lead a meeting, I would encourage her to lead our district meetings. And initially, she was very, very resistant. Didn't feel like that was something that she wanted to do. And we just really started by just taking little pieces. And so it's like, hey, lead the upfront icebreaker. Do you think you could bring an icebreaker to the group to kind of, get us connecting and give people an opportunity to get to know a little bit more about each other before we dive into the performance and kind of digging into rankings and all that sales stuff. And that's where she started. And then we would kind of just little by little field rides, have conversations, have feedback, until she got up to the point where when we had one of our district meetings, she led a significant portion of that meeting, created the deck, walked the team through new messaging for our products, walked through a portion of the sales performance with the team, providing that feedback as a leader would on the team's performance. And so to really kind of see her shift from being resistant about really a virtual meeting was what it was out in the field to coming into a room and leading, partnering with me to lead our district meetings was really, really, really fulfilling to see. And I think for many leaders, especially women, right? And I make this call out because a lot of the work that we do really focuses on developing women leaders. Sometimes women, and research tells us this, are the first to either overthink our capability or to really kind of underutilize and not recognize the skills that we've built. And so we will count ourselves out before we count ourselves in, thinking that we're not ready, or maybe it's asking too much, or that might be something that you take on in a year or two. When I think it's important, especially if you're on the kind of the receiving end of that delegation, but even if you're the one delegating, that you are persistent. I'll focus in on the leader because that's primarily who we're talking to. It's important that you find that balance of challenging maybe that initial kind of shrinking or mindset that I'm not ready, while also acknowledging and listening to what your team members are saying, but kind of having that in the back of your mind that, hey, and you might have this experience, let us know in the comments, where it's like, hey, as a leader, I do kind of recognize that. But the men on my team, when I delegate something to them, they're like, yeah, I'll take that on. And what else do you need? I've got a woman on my team that's like, I don't know if I can do that. Right. So sometimes there's just this difference in how delegation is received. And sometimes your job as the leader is to create that positive tension that, okay, maybe we need to back it down and maybe do baby steps. Maybe, okay, so let's start with the icebreaker, right? And then we'll move up to planning a portion of the meeting. But that is part of your role as that leader, to recognize those skill sets in your people, delegate based on that, and then be that positive tension to encourage them to take on more and increase their confidence in those areas.
Love that. Also, just something I was thinking about in general, speaking about delegation, when you're thinking about, the different tasks that you want to delegate, I think sometimes our mind goes to like that low hanging fruit for a couple of different reasons. But sometimes it's because we think delegating the big task isn't possible, right? Let's say you have all these small things that need to get done that are tedious, but the big thing is that you need to create, some sort of big presentation or something of that nature, right? And a tool that you can kind of use when thinking through this, because I just want to say, like, it is possible to delegate the big thing. Now, you may not delegate the whole big thing, right? But we can break it down into steps. And so thinking about, okay, I have a big presentation that I have to make. So maybe first you need to do some research about the topic that you're making your presentation on. Then you need to identify like a template or a visual guideline for what you want the slides to look like. You need to make an outline of this presentation. Then you need to actually identify like, okay, what's going to go on each slide. Then we build the slide deck. And then maybe we send it off to get approval from our leader, or maybe it stops there, right? And so we took this big thing and we really pared it down. And so maybe a team member can help you with the research aspect, right? Maybe you can create the outline, but then they can kind of divvy it up into slides. Or you decide what the slides are going to be, but then they actually build it out into PowerPoint or Canva or whatever tool you're using to create your slides, right? And so if you ever find yourself with this big thing and you're just like, I can't delegate the thing that's actually important, so let me delegate all these things that are unimportant. Think about, how can I break it down and delegate the things around it, right? If there's 10 steps, you might not be able to delegate steps 4, 5, 6, but can we delegate 1 through 3 or 7 through 10? So that's just a different way to kind of think about the things that are the most important that we actually do need help with from our team. So I just wanted to add that caveat. So talking about time management as a leader. So again, if you learn how to effectively delegate, naturally you're going to see your time management really start to improve, right, as a leader. But here are just a couple of other things that you can kind of think through as well. So first things first, make sure all of your meetings are necessary, right? We all hate those meetings that could have been an email. And one way that you can kind of make sure that they're necessary is by creating the agenda ahead of time. A lot of meetings don't have agendas, and that's why we get in there and it just feels like we're chit-chatting and we may have accomplished something, maybe we didn't. But if you can get into the habit of creating your agendas ahead of time, and if you're leading a small team, right, maybe everyone has a role on the team that's pretty impactful to the big picture, you might be able to have your team members help you to create the agenda each week, right? Or if it's more so you're creating an agenda for a large group. But either way, if you can kind of map out, what are the talking points? What do we need to cover as a group, right? What are the objectives? What needs to come out of this meeting? Are there tasks that need to be assigned? Is there a project that should be concluded at the end of this meeting? But if every meeting doesn't have an objective, then we likely can probably communicate that information in a different way. But when you become a leader, you will be in more meetings. That's just kind of the way it goes. So it's our job to really make sure that, those meetings are actually necessary. So next, you want to understand your priorities. Your ability to prioritize tasks and your time is going to be extremely important, because when you become a people leader, you're still responsible for the work that you're doing, but now you also have to lead a team to the finish line, right? And so we want to think about, what are the tasks that really require your direct attention? What are the tasks that you absolutely need to be involved in? And then from there, again, we can kind of start to delegate the things that we maybe don't need to be involved in. Creating a delegation plan. So there's no specific way that this needs to look, but sometimes, just personal practice, I kind of like to start my week with this. So if I look at all the things that need to be accomplished this week or even this month, right? Kind of already starting to think, who am I delegating to this week, this month? What am I delegating? What do I need to gather, right? What tools do I need to put together for them to be able to do these tasks effectively? And then kind of going from there. That way you don't feel like you're just delegating on the fly, right? You're just, throwing tasks out there as they pop up, but you can really start to take like a proactive approach to the way that you're delegating to your team. Encouraging open lines of communication. So this is a big one too. If you can kind of create some structure around your communication and your updates, it's going to make it a little bit easier for you to manage, when people are coming to you and needing help with various things. But if you don't kind of, allot time for those things, then you're going to find that you're kind of doing it all day, every day, right? You're constantly communicating, constantly asking questions, constantly, sending out messages to the team. But if you can kind of streamline the way that you do that, maybe it's a morning huddle, right? Maybe it's a weekly team meeting. It's not to say that you're not going to have to communicate in between, because you will. But if you can kind of block your calendar in that way, it's going to support you in the long run. And then finally, utilizing time management tools. Now, within the role that you have, it may have already been set for you what tools you use, or maybe you have some free reign there. But just, a project management tool of some sort to help you track the tasks that you're giving to your team. If you are a company that uses Microsoft and maybe you're not into like a project manager tool or anything like that, there's functionality within Teams that you can use to help you to delegate a little bit better. But we want to avoid, just sending tasks via email, because it can get really clunky that way, right? And then finally, just implementing time blocking. I think that's a a really simple one to implement, not always so simple to actually execute on. But if you can kind of block off focus time for yourself as a leader, or block off time for you to review the tasks and the projects for this week, that way you're not kind of scrambling. Because sometimes when we have a meeting heavy week or a task heavy week, we find that we might not be spending as much time on that like thought work or the leadership work. And so if you can kind of block out time to do that more intentionally, it's going to support you in the actual execution as you go. So that's a little bit about time management. Again, I know we kind of talked about that throughout the entire workshop here today. But Brittany, I just wanted to see if you had anything to add before we kind of wrap up.
No, I think that these are two topics that are often kind of overlooked. I don't know that I always see them included in new people leader education, but they are critical for your success as a people leader. So I would highly encourage you again to share with us in the comments. If you have a top takeaway, feel free to share that. If you're catching this back on the replay, let us know that you're here. We get notifications as you are watching and tuning into the session. And then feel free to share this. Share this with another new leader at your organization. If you're an HR professional, if you want to share this with your broader team, feel free to do so. Feel free to reach out to us. And we certainly, I don't know if we've said it today just yet, but encourage you to head over to thenewleaderbootcamp.com. Again, it's thenewleaderbootcamp.com and register for this series. That will ensure that you have easy one-click access to all of the replays in this session. Also, it will ensure that you get notifications about our 5th session. There will be a very, very special session that you do not want to miss. But before we get there, we have our 4th session next week, which is all around innovation. So really helping you shift into this visionary leadership to move from some of the tactical day-to-day execution to how do you really innovate more strategically. I love, we have a comment in here. I use Spirit City Lo-Fi. It's a game that allows you to set timers and create a checklist to plan your day with calm music in the background. Great resource and tip for time management. Thank you for sharing that. What about you, Tatiana? Any top takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, delegation is something that is really important to me. I think from like my own personal experience, like I saw it firsthand what was happening to my stores when they didn't know how to delegate. I saw how it was drastically affecting the business from like a bigger picture. It was affecting our profits, our efficiency, our productivity, which all directly affects our ability to pay our people better and to provide better benefits to our people. And I think seeing it at such a grand level has helped me to see it so clearly for the people that I work with and, everyone here watching live or watching the replay. It sounds so small when we talk about it, but the long-term results, whether good or bad, of delegation are incredible. Like the way that it can positively affect a company, right? The way that people can become more confident, the way company culture can start to improve, the way that you as the leader can start to really like own your role and find that confidence. I think it all starts with delegation. So, as you are developing your emotional intelligence and you're developing those soft skills that are going to help you to really connect with your team and to see your team, delegation is kind of like that beautiful icing on the cake that kind of brings it all together. So those are my final thoughts. But I also think it's going to be a great segue into our final session of this 4-week series. And then, of course, leading into our 5th bonus week.
Absolutely. And we want to see you there. So make sure you head on over to thenewleaderbootcamp.com, register, and we can't wait to see you right back here. Same time, 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, same place, right here on LinkedIn Live for our 4th session. We'll see you next week.